Welcome to Concept to Creation, a podcast featuring entrepreneurs who share their business journey. We'll hear what motivated them to turn their dreams into a business. They'll share stories from the trenches of business, from raising capital, creating products or services, navigating regulations, hiring employees, and managing competition and growth. We'll discover their successes and failures, and they'll provide advice for budding entrepreneurs. Now, here's your host and fellow entrepreneur, Mike Conrad.
Welcome back to another episode of the Concept to Creation podcast. Thanks for being with me today. My guest today is not my typical type of guest. Unlike most other guests on this show, he's not part of the electronic assembly industry. In fact, his products provide an alternative to electric or electronic-based products within his space. I've said on this show and other shows that electronics are ubiquitous. That's to say they are everywhere, except in my guest's product. They are famously, by design, electrical free and electronic free. His electrical free products actually provide a significant advantage to conventional products within his company's space. We'll learn why during our conversation. My guest today is Zachary Green. He is a former U.S. Marine. He's a U.S. Marine veteran, a former volunteer firefighter, a city councilman, a podcast host, an author, and, of course, an entrepreneur. His journey is both fascinating and inspiring. Zachary, I hope I built you up enough. I think everything I know about you, that's probably not even quite enough, but I don't even know how you have time to talk with me with all these things that you do.
Mike, it's a real honor to speak with you. I'm a big fan, and I'm really excited to be on the show with you today.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. And we're both members of the Mutual Admiration Society. Let's just say that.
All right,
there we go. All right, let's get this party started. Before we get into your current business, which is to me a fascinating business, share with me your journey. Who is Zachary Green? You've got a great story. I've heard it before. And I'm sure that every time you tell it, it's a little bit different because there's probably so much to tell. So who is Zachary Green? Tell me about your journey up to this point.
Sure. So born and raised in Cincinnati, Ohio. Matter of fact, lived there up until just about a little less than a year ago. I had a lot of struggles growing up. I had really bad ADHD, dyslexia, a ton of learning disabilities. Went to probably 8 schools from kindergarten to high school, Catholic schools, private schools, Montessori, public schools, you name it. My parents were really great. I mean, they gave me every opportunity that I needed to help me out. But, I grew up a lot being told by a lot of people that I wasn't going to amount to much and that I was going to be a failure and a loser. And that really affects you deeply when you're young. And for me, it energized me. It was my way of saying, I'm going to show all you guys wrong. I'm going to show you how great this is going to be. I know God has put me on this earth for some pretty big stuff. You guys just don't know about it yet. So I ended up always having a deep love for our country and specifically the Marine Corps. I joined the Marine Corps right when I was 18 years old because my parents certainly didn't want me to do it. And it was interesting because during the time at recruit training was very, very difficult. And it was even more difficult for me than for other kids down at Parris Island. What was interesting is the kids that grew up, and I say kids, they're young men actually. Nobody graduates recruit training at Parris Island as a young man or woman. But the kids that grew up in the coal mines of West Virginia or the projects of Louisiana or the sticks out in the middle of Iowa, they had no problem with recruit training. They got 3 meals a day. I mean, most of them did get 3 meals a day when they were back home. But for me, where I had parents that coddled me and took care of me, I really, really challenged to get through the training cycle. What I learned that eventually came the thesis of my book is that iron sharpens iron. The warrior's journey is that of conflict and struggle that gets you stronger and gets you better. And then eventually you have your crucible, that crisis in your life, that point in time when whatever you've done is not enough to get you through it. It could be a death, it could be a divorce, drug or alcohol problem. In my case, it was my business was failing. And in that crucible, you have the abyss, which is failure and death and destruction at the bottom of it. And as the philosopher Nietzsche says, if you stare long enough into the abyss, eventually the abyss will stare back and consume you. And then on the other side of the abyss is, in the crucible, is you need to conquer and you need to transform. And for me, the way that happened was I got out of the Marine Corps, had a great career with Eli Lilly in the pharmaceutical business, doing brand marketing, strategy development, sales, all of this stuff. Then became a volunteer firefighter. I was deeply affected when September 11th happened, and I was no longer in the infantry and couldn't take the fight to the enemy. So I wanted to do something that I could give back to our country, and I joined the fire department. And I got lost very early on. So you talk about electricity, and I know that's a big thing. For me, it's there's a guy named Murphy, and he's got this law of physics, and it's really true when it comes to electronics that anything that can go wrong will go wrong at the worst time, which is what happened with me. I'm in a very dark building. I mean, you can't see your hand in front of your face. I go to turn on my flashlight that was on my chest, and it, of course, didn't work because I probably forgot to charge it up. I got lost and disoriented, almost died, ran out of air, and obviously finally found my way out. And as I was talking to my captain, he said, Zach, you got to get used to this. This is just something that's normal, dealing in the darkness. And I'm thinking like, no, that's not normal. And no, I'm not going to get used to it. There's a problem that needs to be solved here. And so I developed this glow-in-the-dark material with a couple other brilliant scientists and developers. So no batteries, no light bulbs, no electricity. It glows for literally 20 to 30 hours. This is not the glow-in-the-dark stuff you had as a kid in, Halloween. And it's so bright you could literally read a newspaper off of it. I started selling out of the trunk of my car, and over the next 10 years grew it into about a $30 million company and expanded outside of firefighter products to start making exit signs that don't need batteries, light bulbs, or electricity either.
Now, when we were kids, we had glow-in-the-dark Super Balls and things like that. And they would glow. If you held them up to a bright light for an hour, they would glow for about 30 seconds, right? Mm-hmm. So this phosphorescent material was impressive as a kid, but not very practical as an adult because it didn't glow for that long. So clearly some advancements have been made in that type of technology. So what's the difference from what we're used to, a typical glow-in-the-dark as a kid versus the materials we're seeing now?
Well, I hope I don't geek out too much because I love talking about the science of this. That is a zinc-based alloy that's used for the normal glow-in-the-dark. To get the level of glow, there's two things you need. First of all, you got to use rare earth elements. Strontium and europium are the two main rare earth elements that we use. And they're basically energy capacitors. They get energy, in this case, photons, light energy. They hold on to it, and then they slowly release it over time. The second thing that I really perfected was not only the crystals were so bright and work so well. Think about if you pour a thing of salt on a table and all those salt crystals are right next to each other. The light can't penetrate between the salt crystals. If you shine a flashlight on it, only that outer layer would be able to get the light exposure. But if I could do this and separate them, then you're able to get a more efficient glow because this molecule is actually going to charge this molecule, is going to charge this molecule. And that's what I did. I developed a system called Advanced Photoluminescent Technology, APT, and that really revolutionized the business and, again, glowed so bright we were actually able to replace electrical lighting and exit signs because the code doesn't say it has to be electrified. It just simply says it has to be visible in 90 minutes of darkness, and we were able to meet that standard.
So before we get into go down that rabbit hole of the applications that you're currently providing with that technology, I heard you talk before about how you started this, and you were a firefighter, and you had that experience where it was dark, your flashlight wasn't working, you were disoriented, and that obviously creates a grave danger to anyone in that situation, firefighter or civilian or anyone in between. You started wrapping this stuff around your helmet, as I recall the story, and some other firefighters went, "Zach, what do you have?" And that was kind of the beginning of your business. I don't want to put words in your mouth, but my impression was you didn't do this for the purpose of starting a business. You did this for the purpose of staying alive, right? You had a higher passion than just starting a business. So tell me about that experience when you showed up with this, glow in the dark helmet and whatever else you put it on, and the reaction of your fellow firefighters to that, and the conversation you eventually had with your captain about it.
Yeah, so I think one of the greatest TED Talks of all time is Simon Sinek, where he talks about what, how, and why, and how everything should be led with the why. And for me, that's the way that I've lived, not just my life, but certainly my last 10 years once I started this entrepreneurial journey is the why. So the why is batteries and light bulbs fail. The why is firefighters die from disorientation because they lose track of the way in, they lose track of the way out, they lose track of all these other type of things. So what is that problem that I can solve? And so what I did was as I went around the country selling this out of the trunk of my car, literally. I mean, I would go on Facebook and said, hey, the first fire station that says hello to me on Facebook, I'm going to fly out there and do a pizza dinner for the whole station. And I got a call from Albuquerque, New Mexico. Drew out there and ended up spending 2 weeks driving from Albuquerque to Vegas to San Diego, and stopped at probably 30 fire stations along the way and just dropped off more and more of the product. And what would always happen is I'd go in there and say, hey, I'm Zach. I'm a firefighter from the Cincinnati area. Can we go in the bathroom and turn the lights off together? And if they didn't beat me up, they usually think, oh, this stuff's pretty cool. Now, obviously, I brought them in the bathroom because that was the only area that was dark enough. And when I got in there, as the lights went off, I would talk about, hey, have you ever been in a situation where you're disoriented? I'd have them all spin around 2 or 3 times. I'd say, now, where's the door? Nobody knows where the door is. But once I pull this stuff out and I show the glow, then all of a sudden, not only is it lighting the room up, but they can get the perspective. So with that in mind, I had the first couple products. The one thing in the fire service is we are really, really rough on all of our tools, which is why electronics are so unreliable on the fire service, just because you're dealing with extreme temperatures, steam, water, heavy impacts, and firefighters just like caveman. They just break everything they put their hands onto. So I had to make sure it was durable. And I wore it myself. And as I went into the fire and was moved my way down the hallway, I felt someone try to take my helmet off the back of my helmet, or the helmet off of my head, because of the glow that was on there. And I turned around to look at them. Actually, I turned around to slug them, and I could see the green glow in their face mask. And they're like, what is that? I'm like, let's get the wet stuff on the red stuff and get the fire out, and then we can talk about the glow in the dark stuff. And I, again, never sold the glow in the dark. It was always what the problem was that I was solving. I made $5,000 in 6 months going from fire station to fire station. Eventually quit my job at Eli Lilly. Actually, I got a early buyout, like a severance package. Went to a trade show. I had a soccer tent that was held together with duct tape and zip ties to create like a dark area. I had cardboard signs. Next to me are these $100,000 booths from these billion-dollar companies. I had a line that was so long by the end of the show that the other booths were coming over to thank me for having my line spill into their booth so they could see people. I booked $100,000 in 3 days. And I had a problem. I had no money to buy the raw materials. I had no production capability to be able to scale to that point. I had no way to distribute it. But I'm a Marine, and we believe in mission accomplishment before troop welfare. And I was going to do, and I did whatever it took to get those first orders done. And that included maxing out my credit cards, refinancing my house, taking loans against my 401k. I mean, it was a brutal, brutal pathway.
Yeah, that is such a familiar story. I can tell a similar story. I think every entrepreneur I've spoken with on this show and just in my life can tell a very similar story. And that is, be careful what you ask for. All of a sudden, you want business. All you can think about is business. And then you get the business, and then it's like, holy crap. Now, how do I build this? How do I scale this? No one teaches you that. When you're dreaming about a business. Right.
Very easy to sell yourself out of business early on.
That's right. The enemy of a business is growth. Too much growth, uncontrolled growth will kill you. And let's get into that in just a little bit. But before we do that, it's probably appropriate to show our audience exactly what it is that you do. And let's start off with this. This is what most people would see if they're in a high-rise building in a power failure, particularly an older building. They go into a stairwell and it's dark. Or barely lit, maybe some faintly lit exit signs. But the problem with exit signs is you got to get down, turn a corner, turn 180 degrees, go down again, all these different landings. The exit signs are generally over the door. And I would assume if there's a high rise and a major fire, power is seldomly not on, or it's seldomly on. It's frequently not on in that environment.
Well, one of the first things we do as a firefighter is we want to shut the power off. As you guys know, water and electricity don't like each other very much.
They don't play well,
We're
right?
pouring big amounts of water onto that thing. And the last thing we want is to hit something that's hot. So yeah, we will either shut it off, or you've got the smoke that's going to work its way up and end up blocking whatever that light is out there if it's still on.
So what you do, among other things, but kind of what you're known for, is taking a scene like this when the light is on and when the power goes off, this is what you see. And you don't get that kind of view with an exit sign, right? Let me hold the image here. That is some type of photoluminescent tape or paint, or I'm not sure how that's applied.
Little bit of all of the above.
All of the above, right. And then I can clearly see the signs. And this is kind of a pitch black scenario here.
But what I want you to recognize here is if you look at the top right corner of the screen where the Running Man sign is, if you look above that, you can actually see the sign that's not electrified because the glow that's coming off of it's so bright it's lighting up the entire room. You can actually see the fire extinguisher below it. None of that would be visible in the absence of light. Yeah.
It's such a contrast between a scene like this and a scene like this. It's just amazing to me. That's certainly not the zinc-based glow-in-the-dark stuff that we had when we were kids. That we've come a long way from those days. So you told me you started off selling out of the trunk of your car. I love that story. Kind of a vagabond sales guy, right? Just put gas in the car and that's your marketing budget and go to whoever will see you. At some point, you had to scale it up and turn it into not that wasn't a real business, but a more brick and mortar type of business structure. And that takes money. So you talked about, one of the questions I was going to ask you is how did you fund your business? And you started to answer that earlier with, basically the same route that most entrepreneurs follow. And when they're not seeking capital from a bank or a VC or angel investor or something, they're usually funding it themselves. So what was that experience like? Having to borrow from your 401k and max out your credit cards, and tell me how emotionally that affected you, and how much fear was there, or was it just passion over fear? Tell me a little bit about that experience.
I think if I was smart, I would have never done it, but I'm too dumb to realize that. So that's why I was able to do that. I've got more testosterone than probably brain cells, which is most people in the Marine Corps and the fire service. But no, in all seriousness, I look at equity and financing like a pyramid. At the bottom of the pyramid, the basis where you really have to start as you're building that pyramid, you can't start with the top of the pyramid, it is bootstrapping. And that's essential for a couple of reasons. Number one, make sure you put skin in the game. Number two, it's showing everybody else that you've made a commitment because you've really been able to build that out. But you can only put so much of your own money in. And I recommend only to do so much. You shouldn't do everything that you can. I got to a point where I just said, no, I will not put another penny into this business. Even if it's $10, I'm not going to do it because it just, you don't never know. It will never end until you're completely gone. So then the second level of raising money is debt. Credit cards is the first step within that. The problem with credit cards is if you fail, you have to pay them back. And if it's a big credit card like an American Express or something like that, they don't just send you to collections. They'll get attorneys after you. Then from there, you go up to that next level, which is bank debt. Bank debt is great. It's usually not as expensive as credit card debt, but they do want to secure it so that you're going to usually use your house or your car or your business. The good news is if the company becomes wildly successful, you don't have to pay the bank dividends, annual dividends. If the company gets sold, you don't have to pay them a percentage of it. The bad news is if you fail, you will pay the bank back and they'll come after you. And my crucible, which we haven't got into yet, was when my company was failing. We were probably 3 or 4 days away from total, complete liquidation, and I was going to lose my house. They were going to come after me. So then we go up to the very top of that pyramid, and that's private equity and venture capital. Now, the good news there is you don't have to, the good thing about that is you don't have to pay it back if you fail. The bad news is if you succeed, you're going to have to share those profits with somebody else. Now, the reality is everyone says, well, that VC is great. We don't have to give up controls unless you give up 51%. BS. The second you take a penny of venture capital, you're giving up control. Not total control, but they're going to want to see it on the board. They're going to want to influence. And you also have a fiduciary and legal duty once you start taking on investors to allow them to be part of the discussion and the process and education. And for me, when I found the venture capitalists that I chose, I was looking at several of them. I had competing offers, but the reason I went with the one that I went with is they said, we're going to be here not just to give you money, but we're going to be here to help you. And along the way, if you run into hiccups and problems, which I have, we're going to be there for you. And they were, and they are. And that's why I think we've survived to this day.
So you mentioned that there was a point in your business where you thought, this is it. You're basically your business is in a dark room filled with smoke and you can't see, to use that analogy. What brought you to that point, and what saved you from that point? What was these points? And just to reiterate, my business went through the same thing. We were days away from liquidation. I think if my staff knew how little money we had, there was a point where I was going through garbage cans looking for stamps that weren't canceled that I can put on an envelope because I didn't have money to feed the postage meter. So I totally can appreciate that scenario. And I think many new businesses get to that point and many fail. But if you can get over that point, things change. You learn from that experience. So tell me how, what do you think what caused that situation where you almost failed and what saved you?
So what you've described is the warrior's journey. It's the basis of my book. It's a story that goes back all the way to Homer and the Iliad and the Odyssey. And that is, as the warrior is tested and is tried and is pushed, the iron sharpens the iron. They develop that rhino skin that prepares them for that crucible. The crucible could be anything in your life. It could be a death. It could be a divorce. It could be a drug or alcohol problem. And in my case, it was my business was failing. And at the bottom of that crucible is the abyss. And the abyss is that darkness, it's that failure, sometimes even death. And as the philosopher Nietzsche says, if you stare long enough into the abyss, eventually the abyss will stare back, which means it will consume you. And you see that in people that are in really destructive relationships or having problems with drug or alcohol. The longer you're in that abyss, the harder it is to get out. You're digging yourself in that hole and you just keep digging out. To get through that abyss and to get through that crucible, you have to do two things. You have to transform and you have to conquer it. The conquering it, again, not just surviving it. You have to just say, I will never get back here again and I'm going to blow this thing out. But to do that, you got to transform. And to your question here, specifically what was happening and what got me to my crucible, and I'll never forget exactly where I was. It was in July of about 3 years ago in Ko'olina, Hawaii, where my family and I have a place out there. And I talked to my, talked to my CFO, and I said, before I left, don't call me. I don't want anything unless there's an emergency. And guess what? On a Wednesday, I get a phone call. He's very monotone and serious and says, look, we've only got enough money for about 3 or 4 more days and we're done. We're going to be filing for bankruptcy before you get back home. And I had a panic attack. I fell down to my knees. I couldn't breathe. I was crying. My wife and son are freaking out. And thank God my wife's a doctor. She's like, look, you're not having a heart attack. You're just having a panic attack. Go outside and kind of relax. And I remember that was my abyss. That was my bottom. And at that point in time, I made the decision, how am I going to conquer this and how am I going to transform? And the way I did that is I stepped down as CEO of the company that I started. And the reason I did that, and to answer your question, was I was controlling everything. It was me and then everybody else. There was no span of control. There was no hierarchy. It was just me. It wasn't the big decisions that bothered me. It was all the small decisions every day, 20 to 50 small decisions a day that I had to deal with. And I just didn't have time to both grow it, run it, and do everything else. And the financial situation, which even surprised my CFO, is because I wasn't giving him the pipeline. I wasn't letting him know the money that was coming in. We didn't have some stuff. It was a combination of just like 3 or 4 things between a chargeback, a customer that didn't pay us on time, a slow sales month, or whatever. So I brought in a new CEO. I basically said, you run the company. I'm going to be the visionary. I'm going to be the founder. And you see, this is a very common thing with entrepreneurs, is that they ruin their own business because they don't know when to get out of the way. And the best example I can give you is if you're a father, is you got a kid and you carry the kid around on a pillow their whole life, and you never give them a chance to fall down, they're never going to learn how to walk. And you really haven't given them a service. You have to let them fall down. You have to let them go. And eventually, you have to kick them out of the house, because if they're 40 years old, still living on the couch, you're not doing a really good job as a parent. And that's the same thing with the business. So once that happened, that's when we really transformed and things really exploded, because I was no longer the pinch point. I was able to open that up by not just having a CEO, but creating a whole team of senior leadership that really run the company now.
Zach, you are a brother from another mother. I had the exact same experience where I was way too much in control and the company would not grow beyond my talent. And what I learned, sounds like you did too, is I thought, let me back up a little bit. I think some of the prerequisites to start a company from nothing, from your trunk, from my garage, is the attributes required to start a company are ego, naivety, arrogance, passion. You know, you basically have to think that you can conquer anything. And then you soon realize that you're not quite as smart as you thought you were. So I went from thinking I was the smartest person in the room to wanting to be the stupidest person in the room. I don't want to. If I'm the smartest, we're in trouble, because I think I'm pretty smart, but I'm not that smart. And if I can be surrounded by people who are smarter than me, I'm going to be in good shape. And it is so hard. I think that was the most difficult thing I ever did in my life. And that was to take a step down from my business. And, you know, I still own it like you do. I still own my business. I still love my business and my team, my customers, our products. But I knew it was time to get out of my own way. And that's exactly what you're saying, or at least what I'm hearing that you're saying is that's, I think, a very typical part of an entrepreneur's journey. We all have that moment of the crucible moment, that moment of self-discovery. I even had the same crucible moment that you did when you got a phone call from your CEO while you're on vacation saying, you know, we're 3 days away from bankruptcy. I got a phone call in 2008 from my bank. I was in Mexico, standing in a pool, smoking a cigar with a cocktail in one hand, cigar in the other, my phone here. And my banker said, we're calling your loan. And I'm like, why? He goes, well, this was actually 2009. He goes, well, you lost money in 2008. And quite literally, pardon my French, but quite literally, I said, no shit, so did you. You know, who didn't lose money in 2008?
And that's the worst time to call the note in, is when you're hurting like that.
Exactly.
Give me an opportunity to make it up.
Exactly. But it was like the financial crisis. You know, the bank lost more money than all their businesses, all their customers combined, I think. But that was my kind of crucible moment where it's like, okay, we can't rely on banks. We have to do this ourselves. We need to, and that was just a wake up call. That was, that was basically a, electroshock to the chest, and I started seeing my business in a whole new light after that, as I'm sure you did. What was your original vision for your company? And we should point out your company is LumAware. And I have to say, I love that name, because I love when there's some thought put into a business name, as opposed to, Green Technologies or whatever, Zachary Inc., LumAware. I'm assuming the Luma comes from luminescence, or lumens, which is the measurement of the amount of light.
That's correct.
Aware, situational awareness. It's a perfect name for what you do.
And if you look at the logo, the A is actually an arrow, and it's pointing to the light. So it's showing you the directional capability of that.
Even more, there's a lot of little secrets here in this logo here. Yeah, that's amazing. What was your original vision of your company, and has that changed as of today?
It changed with COVID. It changed as COVID changed everything. So my original business plan was executed. I did what I said I was going to do, and that was I was going to build a brand to help my brother and sister firefighters out, and then I was going to use that brand equity to then spill over into the exit sign business, which is 100 million exit signs in the United States. So that was what I needed to do. And then all of a sudden this thing called COVID comes along, and they were like, oh my gosh, you can't go sell to the businesses, the big retailers that were both customers and also vendors of ours, were shutting down. And we have a lot of plexiglass that we use in the production of our exit signs. And I was able to change the milling specs. Instead of cutting an exit sign the size of a license plate, I was able to make a large one and make barriers. And we became Home Depot's largest provider of COVID protective barriers during the pandemic. So that told me and my board and my senior leadership team, hey, we're more than just a glow-in-the-dark company. Now, yes, sales are starting to trickle back up again on the glow-in-the-dark, but we did such a great job with distribution. Home Depot was so appreciative that we were able to execute when nobody else was able to execute at that time. And they said, what else you got? I don't know. We'll find some stuff. And we have. And so now what my focus is trying to just keep that overarching safety umbrella and trying to build out our distribution channels. At the end of the day, it doesn't really matter how good your product is. It matters how good your distribution is. You can have the greatest product in the world. If people don't know about it and they can't buy it and they don't know where to find it, you're not going to be successful. The reverse is also true. You can have a really crappy product. As long as it's got good sales and marketing behind it, people are going to be very successful. You and I probably remember the pet rock. It was a rock. It made millions of dollars because everybody saw it on the commercials and at the end of the checkout counter. So, that's our focus now is just trying to build a portfolio of product and help serve our distributors with giving them innovative products made in America that are safety oriented.
So we talked about the startup challenges that your business and pretty much all businesses have. It's a rite of passage. It's basically business boot camp, right? It almost has to break you to turn you into the business that you were meant to be. And outside of COVID clearly attacked every industry. Some industries did well exclusively because of COVID, but most businesses definitely were affected by it in a negative manner. But besides COVID, what are the current challenges that face your business? The ongoing, the stuff that you don't seem to get over, the stuff that just keeps wash, rinse, repeat, whether it's cash flow or deadbeat customers or whatever. What are the continuous challenges, and how do you rise above those on a regular basis?
So, trade shows were great for us because we have a very visual product that's really cool to see. Getting face-to-face with the sales team. So Home Depot alone, you've got several thousand sales reps, and I spent over 150 nights a year for the last probably 5-6 years just going to different sales meetings and presenting and getting to know me and taking them out to dinner and coffees and all that stuff. So that right there has been the biggest challenge, is how do we get that level of connection without that. At first it was cool because we were doing really innovative video. Instead of doing PowerPoint, we were taking people on tours of our office. I had bought an old restored 1800s firehouse, and we would take them through, and half of the discussion would be about the history of the firehouse and the other half would be the products. But I think everybody's pretty well tapped out, and we all know how to work the system now. You know, you put it on Zoom and you put the little fake background on, and you could be sitting in your car watching, you know, Breaking Bad and don't know what's going on, right? So yeah, that's been the challenge, is trying to get used to this new normal, and trying to find a way that you can still create value to your customers, but do it remotely. And we're all in it together. We're all learning it together right now. It's not unique to my company.
So today, 2022, barely into 2022, based on everything that you've learned through your experience, what, if anything, would you have done differently if you started your business today?
Well, there's a lot of things I would have done differently, but at the time I did the best that I could with the information that I had. So everyone talks about, you know, hindsight's 2020. Yeah, it is. If I could go back and say, hey, I would do these different things, absolutely I would have done it. But again, I didn't know at the time. I made the absolute best choice I could have made with that information. So one of the first things I did is I didn't hire well. And entrepreneurs are usually not really good at hiring people. And the reason why is we're such big dynamic personalities. We're such entertainers. And, you know, you go to any party and the entrepreneur is the one in the corner with 10 people around him sharing the story or whatever. And we interview the same way. We sit there and tell them about how our vision is coming to life and how great we are and how this organization's come together. And then they look at us and they get excited. And then we get excited because they're excited. And then they're excited because we're excited from their excitement. And before you know it, a half hour's gone by, and the you as the interviewer hasn't even asked a question of the interviewee. And the last question is usually like, hey, would you like to be part of this organization? Oh, yeah, I'd love to. Okay, great, you're hired. That was how it went for me. So I had a lot of people that had a lot of heart, but they weren't really good. And then a lot of them were very competitive with each other, because the first group of employees, just because they start with you doesn't mean they're going to finish with you. And the company had drastically outgrew their set of skills, and they actively started trying to hurt the company or the other employees to make them look better. So that was definitely something there. I think just some little legal stuff here and there, just to, you know, the right way to terminate somebody. We got sued because we didn't use the right letter, literally the right word within the paragraph when we terminated them. And it came back on us. I mean, it was so ridiculous and so mundane, but you know what? I'll never make that mistake again.
Don't get me started on that subject. Yeah.
People is the big thing I would have done different.
Yeah, I've often said, in the earlier days of my business, I've often said this would be the perfect business if it wasn't for customers, vendors, and employees. You know, but then you learn to hire better, and that's hire better team members, it's hire better customers, it's hire better partners, and then those problems just go away. You're talking about, you know, how an entrepreneur is a terrible person to hire people, and you're absolutely right. It's very difficult to work for an entrepreneur, because we as entrepreneurs are more like fire starters, which is a bit ironic considering your experience as a firefighter. But we're just little arsonists. We start projects like an arsonist starts fires. We're not interested in completing the projects. We're interested in starting the projects. At least I am. I get a huge amount of adrenaline when I think of an idea and then I start planning it. I'm not interested in the details. You know, I then go off and start another project, and then I go off and start another project, and my team is constantly chasing after me, trying to finish what I've started. And, you know, some of the ideas are good and some are terrible, but I think most entrepreneurs are less interested in all the minutia that goes on behind the scenes to make a company successful, and they're really the cheerleader and the visionary, and not really the doer, or where you don't do it well. At least that was my case. Every entrepreneur.
I was going to say there's a tremendous book talking exactly about what you just said called Rocket Fuel by Gino Wickman, who's the founder of EOS. entrepreneur operating system, which, by the way, I recommend highly to anybody. If you've got over 7 to 10 employees, it's almost a must to try EOS. It's just such a great accountability system and management tool. But what he talks about is rocket fuel is kerosene and liquid oxygen. Those two on their own, they don't really do anything. But when you mix them together, you can literally get to the moon. That's what happens when you pair the integrator with the visionary, the dreamer with the doer. And you look at all great organizations. Take McDonald's. The McDonald brothers, they were the visionary. They came up with this idea to put this rapidly fast cheeseburger into a paper wrap and give it to people very quickly, which was unheard of. But it was Roy Kroc that came along and put that into details into a folder and sold those folders and called them franchises that revolutionized it. Steve Jobs doesn't know how to build a computer.
Exactly.
All he did was walk around the office with his little iPod saying, hey, I want to put all my music on this thing. Let's make it happen. He didn't know how an iPod worked, but he was the visionary. So that it is so important, Mark, and I'm glad you recognize that, because we shouldn't take time away from what we do great. We should spend more time on what we do great and delegate the stuff we don't do great to somebody that does do that great.
Right. And it takes time and wisdom to realize that, because when you start a business, you don't have the luxury of 100 doers around you. You don't have a lot of logistical people around you. You are basically the conceptual person doing the logistical work, which is the wrong, it's a round shape in a square hole. It just doesn't fit. But we do what we have to do to get started. And if we survive that long enough, then we can get to that epiphany moment, the crucible moment, the epiphany moment, where we realize that what our strengths are, and more importantly, what our weaknesses are, and then we get out of our own way, and then that's when the business really turns the corner. Every entrepreneur I've interviewed, every business founder I've interviewed has within their business a unique culture. What's the culture within LumAware? Is it Zachary Green? And if so, what part of the best of you falls into that company?
So it was, and that's one thing that I'm working on changing, because it can't just all be about me. When we went through this exercise to really talk about what is our vision, what is our goal and our focus, and really what it comes down to is this whole concept of accountability, of mission execution, of innovation. Those are all kind of the buzzwords, but when you really get down to it, it's a fun environment. I'm a big fan that if it's not fun, something's not right. I worked at Eli Lilly, where I wear a suit and tie every day for almost 10 years. You will never find me in anything other than shorts and flip-flops. And I do that for a reason. And that's because I want it to be a casual environment. I want it to be laid back. I want to show that we're different than the big companies that are out there. We have a foosball table right when you walk in. I want people to use it. I want them to have fun. We have a bourbon bar set up in our office. I want people to be able to enjoy having a drink, hopefully at the end of the day. I don't like doing time cards. Show up when you need to show up, leave when you need to leave, get the work done. I don't really like doing the whole vacation thing. You take as much time off as you need for vacation, but don't abuse it. And you're not going to take it off during the busy time or when we got the big trade show or whatever. Let's all be reasonable and understandable, and that accountability. Treat this business like it is your own business. And for me, that's kind of the culture that I've tried to establish. Now, what's challenging as I bring in new senior leadership, they're trying to put in systems in place and help us grow. And we unfortunately lose some of that stuff that I like to have early on. But when I look back at it, there's a reason. I think one of the funniest things that's happened to me is at Eli Lilly, I hated the bureaucracy. Any decision had to go through multiple levels of management, then it had to go to legal, then it had to go to ethics and compliance, then it had to go to the brand development. And by the time it came back, it never looked the way it was, and it took forever. Well, now I love the fact that I can just make a decision, boom, let's get it done and go. But there's a reason there's that bureaucracy. When those things happen, their chance of failure is virtually nil. For me, my chance of failure is pretty high, and that's okay because I can execute and fail forward and do 2 or 3 different things wrong before you can do one thing right as those big companies. But it was such an eye-opening experience that that's there for a reason. These big companies, these public companies, they're not stupid. They're incredibly brilliant, very smart. They got a lot of experience. Everything happens for a reason. And as you grow, you have to take the best that you can from those and sprinkle a little of the mix from you and try to, get to a point where you can make things happen.
Yeah, I love that, the culture that you have in your business. And in order for that to be successful, you're absolutely right. You need to hire the right people. It's Jim Collins, the author of Good to Great, wrote, you got to get the right people on your bus, because that culture would only be successful if you have the right people. Otherwise,
people take advantage of that very quickly.
Absolutely, yeah. But people tend to take vacation because if they don't take it, they'll lose it. Therefore, they take it, right? If they know it's always available whenever they need it in unlimited quantity, I think most people would probably take less vacation. Just knowing it's there is enough. There was a rice shortage. This is a bit abstract here, but it does relate to this. There was a huge rice shortage sometime in the 1950s or something in some Asian country, and they thought it would lead to mass starvation. And the reason there was a rice shortage is there was a legitimate rice shortage, but it created panic buying and hoarding, kind of like toilet paper during our pandemic. And that's what really made the rice shortage worse, was this panic buying. And the country thought they could get through it if there just wasn't panic buying, but humans are humans. So another country, I think it was Japan, where we have oil reserves, they have rice reserves. And they announced that they were going to the world, that they were going to open up their rice reserves and ship as much rice as needed to this country that was having this rice shortage. That immediately stopped the panic buying because people knew it was there if they needed it. And problem was solved just without having to ship any rice. It was just knowing it was there and available. And that's kind of the same thing with your vacation policy. Is I have a feeling people take less vacation than they would if they knew that they had to use it or lose it. And they probably take it at a schedule more convenient to the business than they would otherwise. Hire the right people, they make good choices. How many days a week did you work when you first started your company? I have a feeling it was a lot. And compare that now.
All of them when I started. And again, for me, I don't know the only time I really truly took vacation was the time I almost died from a heart attack, what I thought, because you never go on vacation. And the beauty now is, gone are the days of working in the office. It's not going to go back. I mean, if the pandemic had been here for a month or two, then that'd be one thing, but you're not going to be able to hire the top talent anymore if you want them to come in from 9 to 5 and work in a cubicle. It's just not going to happen. Hybrid at the best, but the reality is it's going to be working from home, which also means like yesterday, where I worked? On the beach. I took my little wagon, I set it up, I turned it upside down, I put my laptop on it. I had my nice big Cuban cigar and a big bottle of water and sat in my lawn chair, and I worked for 8 hours yesterday on the beach because I can work from anywhere. It doesn't matter. So that's kind of the change now is, don't go to the office for these 5 days. Go to, San Cabo, but, still check your email and get stuff work. So to answer your question, yes, I was working I don't even know, probably at least 100 hours. And if you include travel, it's probably even more than that a week. Now, very, very little. I check in from time to time. I help out where I can help out. And I do that for a very specific reason. I got to empower the people that work with me to feel like they're doing something big. Otherwise, if I'm down there, and I can notice it, I probably can do a better job than them, but I have to let them do it. You'll never find anyone that's as good as you at working in your company. It's just a given. All right. But if you can find someone that's 60% as good as you and you hire 2 of them, well, guess what? They're doing 20% more than you could do yourself, just from the mere fact of capacity and enough hours of the day.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. What motivates you? Business is hard. Even when it's good, it's still hard because it's all on you, right? and I think there's a general awareness that it can all end tomorrow, right? So I'm particularly aware that, every day we're on borrowed time. Every day is a blessing, and every day is, one more chance to make the world a better place. And that comes with responsibility, particularly when you have a team that relies on paying their mortgage and sending their kids to the dentist, based on decisions you make as the founder and owner of the company. So what motivates you? What gets you to rise above that that ominous responsibility?
Failure. Failure motivates me. And the reason I say that is I expect to win. I expect to be good at everything that I do and everything I touch, because I'm just going to either work as hard as I can or find the people who help me smart. But failure is so difficult for me, and it affects me in a different way than I think it affects a lot of other people. And that is, if I get second place or I don't win, I'm just destroyed. And the embarrassment for me of having a business that failed, people know that I failed, even though 90% of businesses fail. That just, it makes me sick to my stomach just thinking about it right now. And that's not just failing in business, that's just in anything. So it's almost like I'm succeeding because I'm scared. And maybe it's going back to my childhood and knowing that I had so many people tell me I was going to be a failure and not do it, and the opportunity for them to think that maybe they're going to be right. That's for that. I also, and I know it's not a healthy thing to do, but I also live my life in the eyes of other people and what other people think about me. And that plays into that failure thing also, rather than just me sitting back and taking a breath and saying, hey, you did good. Just be happy with it.
Oh, I love it. When you first started your business, how did you define success? And today, has that definition of success changed?
It's funny. So when I started my business, actually, I'm going to go grab something real quick. Just 1 second and show this to you.
Sure.
I bought this model about a week after I started my business. It's a Ferrari. It's one of my favorite Ferraris made. It's a Ferrari F430, gorgeous car. This model sat in front of my desk at every office I had. Every day I'd sit there and I'd look at this model. And I said, one day I'm going to pay for this car with cash. I'm going to buy this thing. And that was my motivation. I would sit there and, come into the office at 11 o'clock at night because I knew we were in a problem. And I'd sit there and play with this little model and say, well, look, if you want that car, it's not going to come easy.
Yep.
I got the car 2 years ago. And I'll tell you, it was anticlimactic because it's just like, okay, now what? Yeah, I love it. Yeah, it's fun to drive. Yeah, it's fun to be seen in. But at the end of the day, I'm just like, okay, what's next? So for me, what motivates me, it was always that reaching for that ring. And then what I realized was it's the journey that's special. It's not the destination. If I had failed along the way, or even if I failed today, I would be so devastated that I failed. But the reality is I made a big difference. I've touched 100,000 firefighters' lives with my products. I got to testify in front of Congress. I've been invited to 2 White Houses. I've raised, $30 million in organic revenue. Those are all great things rather than just the destination. For now, what motivates me is paying it forward. I am starting a new process and a new program to help other entrepreneurs both start businesses, grow businesses using these warrior principles that I've honed and developed and researched. And so that's really where my passion is now. I'm mentoring a couple of companies right now. And my goal is to get about 20 or 30 individuals together and put them into this program to teach them how to use the warrior principles to raise money, how to put a business plan together, how to grow and scale a business.
Tell me about this. That totally makes me jealous because one of my bucket list goals in life is to give a TED Talk. And, I don't know if I have anything good to say, but I've always received a huge amount of inspiration from TED Talks. I love their short format. I think I've never heard a bad TED Talk, even if it's on a subject I'm not interested in. They are all good. And I watched your TED Talk. How did that happen?
I don't remember how I got it, but I remember being so incredibly touched and honored that I did it, not because of me personally, but because of the other people that are giving the talk while I was there. Had some really famous people, some real celebrities, I would say, and we were in the green room before it started, and we're all talking to each other, and I'm just looking around like, this is an amazing company. Also, the people that are there are they're all soaking up inspiration. They just want to have something to inspire and to be there. And there's an energy that's created when you're around people like that. So that was really, really special. I put that as a top 5 experience in my journey over the last 10 years.
And tell me about the podcast, the Warrior's Voice. How'd you get into that, and what kind of stuff do you talk about, and who are your listeners? What type of people are your listeners?
So again, I'm trying to start this program, this process, this framework. It started with the book. At the time, it wasn't the process, but as I wrote the book, more and more people kept coming out to me and like, hey, I want more. What's the next book? Hey, can you coach me? Can you do that? And so that's how I met you, Mike, is, going on to LinkedIn and finding thought leaders and people that are podcast hosts to help share my story of how you can use adversity to overcome your obstacles. But again, there still needed to be more. So that now has transitioned to the Warrior's Voice podcast. We've been up for 3 weeks now. We're already at 1,600 downloads within 2 weeks. So we're really
great.
excited. And I say we because I've got a active duty full bird Marine colonel who's one of the commanders down at Paris Island. And we do it as a co-host. And so we interview each other. We interview other people. And it's the common thread, like our last interview, we had a guy that grew up in gangs, served 10 years in the penitentiary, drug, alcohol, suicide problems, you name it. And now he is one of the top wrestling coaches and an inspiration for the kids. We had another person on that was, the principal bassist in the Cincinnati Symphony and shared his stories of how music impacts the mind, the body, and the spirit, and how that can apply to the warrior's journey. So that's been the process. Some really exciting guests, really stories, but the common thread is how can you use those warrior principles to get through the challenges in your life?
Yeah, awesome. The word warrior is common in your business and in your business model. I can see a lot of similarities from a warrior's mentality and how you run your business. How important is that warrior mentality, and how has that benefited your business?
So if you look at Merriam-Webster, the definition of warrior is one that's involved with struggle or conflict. And I think that is just so accurate as entrepreneurship. It is hard. It is tough. One of the great privileges I had was I was selected by President Obama personally to represent the United States as one of 10 entrepreneurs at the Global Entrepreneurial Conference. And what happened was it was in Stanford. They had 10 entrepreneurs from 40 countries represented there. And then they had a panel discussion with Zuckerberg and Musk and, all the famous entrepreneurs. And someone asked, does it have to be this tough? And unanimously, every one of those entrepreneurs on the stage said, yes, it absolutely does. Because if it's not tough in those early days, you'll never be prepared for when things really start getting crazy with you scale up. So that is, yeah. So my company is Warrior Enterprises, LLC. Underneath that, we have the book Warrior Entrepreneur. We have our online training and coaching program that's getting ready to launch here called the Warrior Framework, which will include business-to-business coaching, individual coaching. We'll have quite a few different things from seminars to workbooks to one-on-one workshops there. You've got the Warrior's Voice. And again, that common thread amongst all these things is how can we use adversity and challenge to prepare you for your crucible? Because you can make decent money in corporate America, never get stressed, work in the cubicle every day. That for most people, that's fantastic. You never have to worry about, you never have to say never, because you can always lose your job. And we know how crazy that can be. But if you want to take the warrior's path is great because there's no ceiling to the amount of money you can make. But there's also no floor to the amount of money you can lose and the amount of money that you may not make. You lose that safety method. And I only want to be with warriors in my journey in this process here, people that are willing to take the harder road. And then when they can achieve, they know they've achieved greatly versus other people that, never have known either success or failure.
Well, not to lower the accomplishments of Marines, but I do think that anyone who starts a business from scratch and ends up with a successful business is in their own right a Marine of sort. They are certainly a warrior because they fought many, many battles, and they ran up a lot of hills to capture flags, and they sacrificed physically, mentally, emotionally, financially to build their business. And so I do think there is a lot of similarity between a warrior in battle and a warrior in business.
Look,
I think stakes are a little different, but they feel the same, right?
No, it does feel the same. And the warrior that is the mom that's working two jobs so her kids can go to college, she's the warrior.
Right.
The one that's at Starbucks right at closing time on their laptop because they're just trying to grind it out because they don't have enough money to be in the office. That's the warrior, the business incubators. And again, it's a very common thread that you see amongst all those professions, from the military to public service to entrepreneurship. It's that using iron to sharpen your iron.
Last few questions because we're about out of time. I'm sure that many of your friends outside of your business see you as an entrepreneur and a business owner, and they probably have a different perception of what it's like to be an entrepreneur and a business owner. What are some of your friends' perceptions of what owning a business is like versus what it is really like to own and operate a business?
No, I think I'm really raw. I mean, I share a lot. I share too much. People like get off social media stuff. No, I talk about the dark struggles. I talk about all that stuff. So they've seen it and they know what I've been through. And I don't want them to think that it's just rosy, because in my darkest moments, those were the guys that I needed to lean on. I've got a really beautiful group of friends back in Cincinnati. I'm Jewish. One of them's Catholic. Another one's Muslim. Another one's Puerto Rican. And the four of us get together around a campfire. It usually involves some cigars or bourbon or something like that. And we used to meet almost every week. Now, before I left, it was maybe once a month. But it was so therapeutic because one of the guys was very, very senior at Procter & Gamble, probably like a top 10 or 15 person there. Another guy bought and sold billion-dollar companies. You had me. And we were just able to be raw and share with each other. And so I've cried with these guys saying, guys, I'm going to lose my house. I don't know what's going to happen. And I've also taken them for rides in my Ferrari too. So, I mean, it works.
I've seen both sides.
It works both ways. Yeah.
Oh, that's great. And what advice would you give budding entrepreneurs?
The first thing is don't do it until you're at least 30 years old. And I'm really serious about that. And I know a lot of people don't like that. You see all these universities now that have entrepreneurship programs, and you got to have real world experience. And the main reason is I'm a firm believer of finding people that do great things and shamelessly copy the hell out of them. Go to the big company, get trained on Six Sigma, get trained on leadership attributes, learn how to become a master at Excel. And then when you feel you've got those skills, then go off and do it. And you've also built a network. The other one is to have a mentor and to be a mentor. And at the same time, there's going to be people you're going to be mentoring maybe when you're right out of college or in high school that are needing help. And then you're going to be with the guy that's, maybe 20 years into his business or something along those ways. And then finally, it's grit. This is not a part-time job. This is not a thing for the faint of heart. You will fail multiple times till you succeed. Sometimes it may be the whole business may fail. Sometimes it may just be certain steps along the way within the business were failures. But that's how you ultimately get there. The entrepreneurs that win aren't the ones that were smarter or better. They were the ones that didn't quit. Because at the end of the day, right, every solution has every problem has a solution if you're willing to do it. Most people aren't willing to do what those solutions are, like dig through the trash to find the stamps or refinance your house or to do those other type of things.
Yeah, excellent. Last question, Zach. How do you define your success in business? And let's put it into percentages. How much of your business success would you attribute to skill, and how much would you attribute to luck?
I'm not. I mean, I love luck. I think it's great, but I don't rely on luck. I do believe that you create your own luck. My skill is my personality. It's my ability to have people trust me and to join me in my journey. Is my passion is my skill. I would say that is what's happened. Yes, there was luck, and I think luck is a lot. It's really divine intervention. I have a firm belief in God and that He puts a plan out there for us. And I don't believe in coincidences because there's just been too many people I've met and too many things that have happened that there's just no way they're coincidence. There's no way it's just luck. I mean, I feel there's a bigger force and a bigger thing working out there.
Yeah, I should probably change that question in the future and add a third category and call it providence. So
Yeah.
Yeah, I do. I love your statement that you create your own luck, but it's totally true. I have friends that if it weren't for bad luck, they'd have no luck at all. And I mean, any day that goes by, something bad happens to them. It's always them. I would never stand next to them in a lightning storm, ever, because I know I know what would happen. And then I have,
and I would argue that. I was going to say, I'd argue they'd probably put themselves in that situation,
absolutely,
or their attitude or whatever else.
Absolutely, and I think just the
things
opposite
happen, and it's how you react to it.
Right, and it's just the opposite is true too. People who are, people who are always unlucky. They're always on the short end of a deal, and people who, are just totally blessed. That everything good happens to them, and I do believe that a lot of it is how we run our lives and how we run our business and how we treat other people and how our view on the world. I think we can, to a certain degree, change our destiny, and whether that's through God or through luck or through whatever, I think that we have more control over it than most people think, and those that already know that, it's just part of them, and others are still trying to figure out how to do it. Well, Zachary Green, thank you so much. We have some unanswered questions, but maybe when you get to your next empire, we'll talk again and we'll ask some of those questions and others. But it's been extremely inspirational and informative. Thank you so much for opening up and sharing your business journey, both the successes and the scary parts. And I do look forward someday to sitting in that Ferrari with the top down and a cigar, held out the window, and maybe a little bit of bourbon chaser once we park. So I'll look forward to seeing you someday. So thanks a lot. Continued success, and thanks for being so open with me and my guest.
Mike, have a great day, and thank you for all you do for our fellow entrepreneurs.
Thank you. Well, that's a wrap. Thanks for listening to or watching this episode of the Concept to Creation podcast. If you're listening to the audio version of this podcast, please be sure and subscribe. We're available on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, and virtually wherever you get your podcasts. If you're listening to this in the car and you would like to see the video version of this as soon as you get home, as soon as you get back to the office, be sure and search for us on our YouTube channel, the Concept to Creation YouTube channel. When you're on the YouTube channel, be sure and hit the subscribe button and hit that bell icon so you'll be notified of new episodes as soon as they're released. We do release new episodes on the first and third Tuesday of each month. Thanks again for watching. We'll see you again in a couple of weeks.
Living free, and I was meant to be free.